Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair. This week we have Christian Manelopoulos. I'm pretty sure I said that right. Sit back and enjoy Chris for a while. Today we have Chris Manelopoulos. Did I say it right, Chris?
You said it perfectly.
Right, perfect. How are you, Chris?
I'm good. How are you, Will?
Excellent. How's Rachel?
Good. She's in the background. She's listening, and she will correct me.
Okay. What will happen? Will it go black, or will you buzz or something?
Yeah. It was like a remote caller. She's like, "Why did you say something stupid like that?"
Well, we need those people, Chris. I get that all the time.
I definitely need that. People to keep me back on track. So,
all right, let's start. The first question I'm going to ask you is basically the only question, but I'll poke and prod afterwards. Tell me how you first got started in the sport of dogs and how old you were.
Okay. So I was like 14, 15, and I was in Melbourne, Australia. My family had always had poodles, purebred poodles. And we would go to like the Melbourne Royal Show and things like that and watch the poodles be shown. We didn't really show our poodles, but we were interested in purebred dogs. And when I was a kid, I was really pretty good at golf, and I had injured my knee. And across the road from where I lived, there was an obedience club. And so I had to have surgery on my knee, and I would sit at home on the weekends and I would watch the dogs over at the obedience club. And that actually switched my attention more to the dogs. And I went over and started talking to people, and I really liked Irish setters. I thought they were really pretty. And that got my interest in purebred dogs. Then I started to go to some dog shows. There were a couple of good Irish setter breeders that lived near where I was. That was my initial interest, was Irish setters. One that just passed away, Keith McCarthy, Greg Brown. And so I would go to shows, and it developed from there. But I always had the interest in poodles, and I knew a lot of poodle people going to the shows. I would always go watch the poodles and that kind of thing. So that was like 85, 86 in Australia. And then
how old were you at this point?
I was like 15 when I started. Yeah. And then I went to shows. I started to get a little better at handling and things like that. And I showed mostly setters. I showed Gordon setters for Robin Wallace and Esther Joseph, and some English setters of Bev Watts. And then I was friendly with Lynn Schelling or Watson, and they had golden retrievers, but she had Afghans and greyhounds as well. And I showed their dogs, and Lynn had sent Lisa Bettis to the United States to go work for Joe and Pauline Waterman about 6 years earlier. And so Joe and Pauline called Lynn and said they had a girl from New Zealand who was leaving, and they said, we'd like to try and find someone. And so Lynn called me, and she said, what do you think about going to the United States and learning and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, go for 6 months. And literally, a couple weeks later, I was in Los Angeles, and it just all happened like that. So it was pretty fast. I was 20 when
Jeff at that age, my God.
Yeah, I was 20 when I came to Los Angeles, and it was a great learning experience being in Los Angeles. And in many ways, that 80s and 90s was kind of the golden era of California, West Coast dog shows, I think. You had a bunch of really big handlers, Bruce and Gretchen Schultz and Corky, Bill and Taffy was starting out, and then you still had some of the older handlers that were still around, and so it was a great time to go out there. But as a 20-year-old, I just was like, I got to go to America and I got to see the world, and there was no real fallback plan, or no, like in my mind when I came to Los Angeles, I never had an intent really to go back to Australia. The only way I would have gone back to Australia is if I was practically homeless and I needed to get back. But that was never my goal to go back to Australia. So wow. Yeah, so I don't know if I'd do it now.
So you came to LA and you worked for Joe at that point?
Yeah, I worked for Joe and Pauline for 4 years. And then I worked for Tim Brazier for a little bit more than 5 years up in Seattle. And, like I said, that early time in Los Angeles, it was great. Joe and Pauline at the time were top handlers out there, very successful, and they were very friendly with Dick Beauchamp from breeding the Bichons, and I tell everybody, I remember Frank Sabella would call the kennel every week and want to talk to Joe and Pauline. I remember talking to him on the phone many times, and Dick Beauchamp, and actually Patrick and Pippi Guilfoyle, they worked for Kennel Review at that time. And so I met a lot of those people out there. It was a great experience in California. And, it was a tremendous change from Australia. But Joe and Pauline still bred a few Bichons. They had a lot of Bichons and Bedlingtons. And I tell people, I started to groom Bedlingtons, and they are exceptionally hard dogs to groom for a number of different reasons. And so, in retrospect, it was a great learning experience because it teaches you how to have really good finish work, because the Bedlingtons' coats are so soft, and also Bedlingtons are, at least the ones I always worked on, were a little hyper. They would drool while you were grooming. So it taught you to be very patient with them. You'd get all the legs perfect, and then they'd start drooling and they'd get all wet. So it taught you, a lot of patience, but it was a great experience. And Joe and Pauline, introduced me to a lot of people. Pauline, as I've said before, she didn't really teach me that much about handling or grooming and that kind of thing. She taught me a lot about animal husbandry, and then a lot about the business side. Pauline was very into the care of the dogs, making sure that they were healthy, well taken care of, those kinds of things. But then also, they had a lot of wealthy and celebrity clients, and she could, was good about teaching you how to handle those things, because it's one thing you get successful in showing dogs and you start winning, but then you have a couple of wealthy clients, and how do you juggle the balance between multiple clients? Because sometimes they're not used to being told no, and you have to learn those things as a handler. The business side of it is very important, as well as the care of the dogs. I say to people, the in the ring showing part is a small portion of it. It is a big landscape, and the handling part only takes a little bit. The business side, the animals, help, all those other things have to be dealt with, and you have to pay equal attention to all of those things. So she was a great learning experience for that. And then in '95, as I said, I'd always had an interest in poodles, and at the shows in Los Angeles at that time, we had Gary Whitmire and Brian Cordova, Leslie Simmons, Tina Ewell, Alan Chambers, Art Montoya, and I always would spend a lot of time with the poodle people, Curtis Smith also, so then I was in '95. I decided I wanted to just do the poodles, and I went to go work for Tim, and that was a tremendous learning experience. And working with Penny for 5 years also was great. She taught me a lot, and Tim was same thing. He didn't teach me that much about grooming, that kind of thing, but he taught me a lot about the business side of it, and also campaigning dogs, which is also another skill you have to learn. Learning how to deal with judges, how often do you show to a judge, things like that. And he was great about that. He would talk it out a lot with Penny about, should we go to this show? Should we go to that show? That kind of thing. So it was a great learning experience to learn those things, in campaigning dogs. And as I say, that's another skill many people don't learn. It's one of the benefits of working for a professional handler is learning those things. If you've never worked for a successful handler like yourself and campaigned a dog and tried to make it number one, you don't know, how many times am I going to show to this judge has given me best in show before they don't point at me? Right. Just because they're judging best in show next weekend doesn't mean I should necessarily go to that show. And so that was a great learning thing. Tim and Penny were very good about teaching you about, well, not teaching you, but you learn through osmosis from being there. Yeah. So, and then I moved to North Carolina in 2000, and Rachel and I went out on our own. So,
you jumped a lot there. How did you meet Rachel?
Actually, I met Rachel. I tell this story in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in 1993. So Rachel and I have known each other almost 30 years now. So when I would work for John Pauline, they would win a lot, and usually I'd be the only one ringside clapping for them, which was my job, to stand and clap in the groups and everything. When you win a lot, you don't get a lot of applause. And so we were at this show, and Tim was showing his poodle, and Rachel was standing there, and she was the only person clapping for Tim, because the same thing, not many people clap for Tim. And so I went over and I was like, oh, there's this cute girl, and she's clapping for Tim. And so we started talking, and that was where Rachel and I met in '93 at a dog show in Albuquerque.
But did you get together at that point?
No. We were friends. We were friends, and we would just kind of talk. And back then we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have cell phone. I mean, I remember Tim had a cell phone, and he used to carry a case with a cord, and it was like $4 a minute. Right, exactly. It was like $4 a minute to talk on it or something like that. But no, we would write letters to one another. Yeah, that was our email. It was snail mail. But also Rachel was living in Northern California at the time, and I was in Southern California. And so we would talk, and we would see each other at dog shows, and we were friendly in a group, but we were not together until much later, until like 99, that kind of thing. But we were friends from 93 to 99. Yeah. So
a long time. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a few other questionable people in between.
Yeah. All right, so I've got through that. Let's get back to North Carolina. You're just about on your own, or let's go back a little bit when you and Rachel are really together and decide this is what you want to do.
Yeah, well, so at that time, actually, Rachel was living in Northern California, and I was working for Tim. and we had decided to go on our own. And at the time, we had looked at Northern California, but it was, prohibitively expensive in California to find a kennel and do all of those kinds of things. And, back then, still today, poodle people will use you no matter really where you are. I mean, obviously, if you live in Florida, it's easier to use a handler in Florida or New York, vice versa. But people will send you dogs no matter where you are if the talent is there and they want them shown. And so Rachel had a client who lived in North Carolina and had moved out there, and she said to her, why don't you come out and I can help you get started out here. It's cheaper, it's easier to get around. We have more shows, all of those kinds of things. So at first I wasn't really for the idea, but I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? We move back to California or Seattle or something like that. So that was how it came about. And we moved to North Carolina. At first, we rented. We rented and we lived in. These are where coincidences and dog shows happen. We rented space in Terrydale Kennel, which Murphy had been in, but was no longer in. And so we lived there for about 6 months. We rented space there. And that was where we first got started in Apex, North Carolina. And at the time, I didn't know, I knew Murphy from coming out to California at dog shows and being out on the West Coast. And when she had shown Peggy Sue, we would see her at shows and I would talk to her, but I didn't know her in a friend capacity at that point. But then we moved to Pittsburgh, which is not that far. And David and Ellen Roberts were very helpful and instrumental early on with Rachel and I. Ellen was very motherly and she helped tremendously with getting things started early on in North Carolina. And she knew a lot of people out here and helped tremendously with getting us going in North Carolina. So we owe David and Ellen a lot of gratitude. And but then we lived there for about 3 years. Then we leased Joe Kanani, who had owned Murphy's Scotty, Peggy Sue. He had bought a kennel in Greensboro, and there was a boarding kennel, and then there was a house with like a smaller show kennel, and we leased that. And then at that time, that was kind of really more when we became friendlier with Murphy and Jennifer and developed that and, build our clients and all that kind of stuff. And then success came. You have a little success at the beginning, but then it builds and builds and builds. And you get better clients and better dogs. And it takes time, but it comes. Yeah.
What year are we at right now?
So we moved to North Carolina in 2000, and then it was probably early 2001 we moved to Pittsburgh from Apex, and then Greensboro was like 2003. The kennel we're in here, we've been here almost 12 years now. So, there's Rachel. She's off to an appointment.
You must approve of what you're saying if she's leaving you alone now.
Yeah, she must be okay so far. So, so we've been on our own now, 23 years, almost 23 years. It was like June of 2000 when we moved to North Carolina. So, which seems like a long time sometimes, and then other times it seems like it was just a blink of an eye. And, I think back now and I was, 29 when I moved here, and it's just, you think, well, where did all the time go?
It's true. What was the first dog that was impactful for you that you came prominent with?
Yeah, I mean, we'd had a couple dogs that had won some best in shows, but probably the first really the one that really changed everything was our friend Debbie Cozart. She was an American and daughter of Doris Cozart, and Poodle, so all Poodle people will know her. She had moved to Australia, and actually I met Debbie in Australia, and she had a dog at Tim's, so she would come to the United States, and I met her again and, developed a relationship when she was at when I was at Tim's, and she would come. And in 2003, she came to the Poodle Club of America, and she said to me, she said, I have a bitch at home better than any of the bitches that I saw here today. And she said, I think my bitch should have, if my bitch was here, I think she should have gone winner's bitch at PCA today. And she said, would you be interested in her? Do you have someone that would, pay for her? And I said to her, I had a guy who had been pestering us to get a special for probably 2 years at that point. And he had a couple of specials with a couple other people. He had a dog with Jeff Arch, and he had a dog with Larry, and also with Nancy Martin as well. So I asked him about it. He was all excited. We got Tasha was her name. Her registered name was Koshin, Style, and Splash. And she came over, and first weekend she won like 2 groups from the classes. Then she won a specialty best in show like a month later. And then I took her out maybe 2 months later, and she won a best in show from the classes at a 2,000 dog show. And we were like all excited. And so this guy was really eager. And then we never heard from him again.
Oh, geez.
He didn't pay the bill. He had dogs with, as I said, with Jeff, and same thing. He never paid his bill with Jeff. He just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. And so, we go from being really excited about this dog to, oh my God, what are we going to do now? And we had been friendly with Gina Weiser, and she had been showing dogs for Zuleika in Brazil. And she said to me, Zuleika was starting to breed standard poodles at that time. She had previously bred miniature poodles and a few toys. And so now she wanted to start breeding standards. So Gina Weiser put Zuleika and I together, and yeah, the rest is history, as Rachel just said. But not quite.
Rachel. It's about like 20 years.
Yeah. So Zuleika went on Tasha. She won Best in Show at Poodle Club of America. She won at Westminster AKC show. She won like 20 Best in Show. She won Quaker Oats Award that year. And so that was the first one that really changed everything. And then it changed our lives because from Zuleika initially just went on her to back her and show her, but then it changed, and Zuleika then wanted us to run her breeding program, and Gina was retiring from handling and becoming an AKC rep, so Gina wanted us to take over for Zuleika and handle all the breeding and help guide her in what she was doing. And so, I've told this story before. I said to Zuleika, before Gina, Zuleika had dogs in the United States with a couple of different people and had pretty minimal success. And here's this lady who's a billionaire, and I said to her, you have all the resources in the world to have the best poodles and to have successful dogs, and yet so far you've won 2 classes at Poodle Club of America, one being a novice class. And I said, we need to change this around, and we can breed dogs that you can be successful with. And then a few years later, she'd won 100 Best in Shows and bred some dogs that had done some winning, and it was a great relationship for us because Rachel and I were always very interested in breeding poodles, and so it gave us a way to continue that breeding. Because I fortunately, Tim had let me breed some dogs when I had lived and worked for Tim, and just to go back a little bit on that. I had gotten my green card working for Tim, and I was very fortunate that Tim had sponsored me to get a green card. But I was also very fortunate he had allowed me to breed some dogs, and I had sold a couple of dogs. And I've told this story. I sold a dog. I had bred a really pretty white standard bitch, and she had gotten like best puppy at a Poodle Club of America regional, and I was approached about selling her to Japan. And at first I was like, no, I'm not going to sell her, and all this kind of. And then I got a lawyer bill from the immigration attorney, and I was like, okay, well, I'll revisit selling her. And so I sold her to this guy who I'd never heard of. His name was Toshi Omura, and and he was a handler in Japan. And that is how I met Toshi of Smash Poodles. And he went on and showed her, and she won Best in Shows. And selling her paid my lawyer's bill to get my green card. And so when Rachel and I came out and went on our own, we didn't breed any litters for about 4 or 5 years. And so then this relationship with Zuleika, we got back into breeding dogs. And so we handled what we bred, and Zuleika had the resources to keep and, pay for all of that. So it was beneficial for both of us, and she enjoyed the success. And Zuleika bred a lot of different animals, and enjoyed a high level of success. And she was a very intelligent lady, and I always say she was smart enough to know she didn't know, so she hired people that did. and it worked very well for her in many aspects of breeding animals. And she enjoyed tremendous success with not just dogs, but cows and horses and sheep and other things. So, yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So go on.
I was going to say, so then where we're at. So Tasha was like the first really successful one that we had. And then, we bred a few. And then fortunately, we followed it up just a couple of years later with Brighton Minimoto. And same thing, we had shown several dogs for Ladine. One of the first winners we had was one of Zuleika's one of Ladine's first winners, was a bitch named Brighton 3 Wishes. And so then, when Minimoto came around, she was really the Brighton Kennel's first really big winner at that point. She'd had a couple others that had won some Best in Shows, but no one that had won at that level at that point. Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. And then, other people have come along. Now we breed, with Missy Galloway for probably the last 12, 14 years. And then Barry in England and Karen. And, we'd always had a relationship with Karen Lafrac because of showing so many Mikimoto puppies over the years. And I tell everybody, we finished the first Mikimoto champion puppy a long time ago. So, yeah. And
just drop back to Minimoto, because I know you did a lot of winning with her. Did she win the Group of the Garden twice? Is that what she did?
She did, yeah. She won twice in 2007 and 2008. And
that's exciting.
Yeah, yes, it was exciting. And, it's also, we had won, not won the group, but we won the breed with Tasha, and we'd won with a Mini, and you think at that time, oh, we can do this all the time. And then after winning 2 groups at the Garden, it was, probably 6 or 7 years before I won another breed at the Garden. So you when you think, you don't necessarily have an appreciation of what you're doing at the time, and then when you have a little bit,
there's no question.
Yeah. You think, oh, I can do this over and over again, and it's a little harder than it looks. You don't always realize that, but it was very exciting, and you know, same thing. It opens up a lot of opportunities with a lot of different people. You know, the breeding side of it, but also the showing and traveling the world. You know, we started going to world shows and things like that, going over to Europe to dog shows, going to crafts, things like that. And you know, I enjoy going to those places because, hey, you know, we go to so many dog shows. You go to, you know, 150 dog shows in a year. You see the same dogs, the same people all the time. So going somewhere different, it's great to get a new insight on people and talk to people. You know, what are you dealing with breeding? What issues are you having? And then also seeing where, you know, they're doing well in some areas and where not, and vice versa. You know, we're going to Crufts in a couple of weeks, and it'll be actually the first time we've left the country. Last time Rachel and I went to Crufts in 2020, I mean, and we came back like 3 days before the travel ban started. And I said, little did we know when we left Crufts how our lives would change over the next 3 years. And then we're going to Crufts in a few weeks, and it'll be literally, it is the first time we've left the country in 3 years. And it'll be interesting to see the differences over there and what's happening and seeing different dogs over there. But I enjoy that part of it because, you know, even though we specialize in poodles, and I like to look at poodles, but I also, you know, I enjoy other breeds, and I like to go see.
When I saw you the one year we saw a lot of each other, you had the Afghan dogs. So.
Right. Well, and the same thing, you know, I mean, well, you show, I say the iconic dog show breeds, you know, it's like Irish setters and Afghans and wire fox terriers and poodles and boxers. And, you know, everybody thinks they know everything about an Irish setter because they see them all the time. And yet most people actually don't know the fine details of an Irish setter or what makes this one a really great one as compared to another one. And it's the same with poodles. You know, many people think they know what makes a great poodle. That's actually a very small group of people that can tell you why this one is better than that one. And so I enjoy going to these world shows and actually talking with people in other countries that are knowledgeable about some of those things. And it's not to say, you know, when you go to a regular dog show and people come talk to me about poodles, I don't enjoy talking to them about poodles. But sometimes when you go to England, there are people that you will talk to that you really respect their opinion, and you want to know, well, why do you like this one or not like that one? And you have to be objective about it. You know, people tell me I say all the time, you know, I think no one ever likes any of my dogs because all they ever do is tell me what's wrong with them. What they would change and all that kind of stuff. And then years later they say, oh no, I love that one. I thought you hated it. Like, no, I was just being objective about what I would change, but no, I love that one. And I was like, oh, okay.
It's true, and different perspectives are so important for us to grow, I think so.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and so I do enjoy talking to people and you know, obviously very knowledgeable people about different breeds and seeing some of those things in different countries, and it brings a new perspective to things. So
for sure, it's like I want to touch on the Azawak too, because we don't see many Azawak up here, but you've done very well.
Yeah. Well, right. The Azawak, I think, you know, it's another one of those ones. I mean, it's a very ancient breed, but also it's really about rewarding quality. And the thing about it is what appeals to many people that don't know the intrinsic parts of the breed is that the most common faults are the most flashy to common eyes. So when it's a little, like I say, like right. So it's like I say now, I'm obsessed with Pekingese, and I mean, I have a few, but I'm really interested in learning about them because what makes them really good are these very fine details, and it's all about quality. So Azawak is the same thing. It's what makes a really good one of these really far, I won't say man-made, but the shape is unusual, the top line, the angle of the croup, the underline, all those kinds of things. The fact that they shouldn't have a big gate like a Saluki. And so what appeals to many people is they see ones that have like a big flashy side gate, and it's actually incorrect. And that's why I say people think they know, but they really have no idea. And with Azawak, it's really about rewarding quality and looking for these fine details that set them apart from the common dogs. And the same with Pekingese. It's, people think they know, but actually what appeals to most people are the faults that don't appeal to the people that really know. And sometimes in poodles, it's the same thing. And I'm sure, I'm sure in setters, there are things that, people look at and think this is great, but really it's not. And it's something we want to avoid. And, it's learning about those things. It's really about learning and rewarding quality. And all dogs have faults. I mean, there's all things you would change about all dogs. But knowing what sets this one apart as being a really great one is defined. But I'm sure as I see the beagles in the background with you, I'm sure it's the same thing. Everybody thinks they know what makes a great beagle, and yet probably very few people actually know what makes a great beagle. The fine things that set one beagle apart from another, only really a handful of people would know those details, or could say, these 6 dogs, why this one from 1 to 6 is the best, and be confident in their opinion. Other people, they're guessing.
Well, I love the way you say that the common faults are what catch people's eyes sometimes as something positive for. That really makes a lot of sense in there, because I start thinking about the different breeds, and you're right on the money, man.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. It is why we have a little bit of the common tremendous reach and drive in every breed. They all stand and bay, all that kind of stuff, and those are not necessarily good qualities to have. And with Azawak, it's, to go back to them, their shape is unusual, their top line, they have that very steep croup, the straight front, the underline. So many people look at them as like a smooth Saluki, and they want a flatter shape. It should be harder. They want them to flow better. They shouldn't. And it's knowing those things and rewarding those qualities. But I got interested in the Azawak. I tell this story because years ago, Frank Sabella called me, and he said to me, "Oh my God, I was over in Italy and I saw the most magnificent Azawak." And he said, "You need to call Zuleika and you need to get her to back this Azawak, and you'll be top hound next year." And I said to Frank, I said, "Well, there's a problem because the breed's not recognized." I said it's a little hard to win with one. He's like, "Oh, you get it over here in the miscellaneous," and he's like, "a year, and they'll recognize that breed. It's so beautiful," and all this kind of stuff. And I said to him, "Well, tell me about this dog." And so he's telling me, I said, "Did you check its bite?" And all that. And he's like, "Well, no, it's like." It's like we couldn't catch it for 3 days. He said, but every time I saw it run by, it was magnificent.
I think I heard him tell that story once.
I was like, oh, okay. So that got my interest, and he introduced me to Patricio and Francesca in Italy, and then I got interested in Azawak. I met them, the first time I met them, I guess, was 2014, I guess. It was at the World Show in Helsinki, so for whatever year that was. And the first time I'd met them in person. We had talked on Facebook, but that was the first time we met in person. And by coincidence, we all stayed at the same hotel. They taught us a little bit about Azawak, and that got our interest. So when we went to the World Show in Milan, we went to their kennel after the World Show in Milan. And same thing, that got us really interested. And that was a tremendous experience going there. I tell, it's another great adventure. We trek across Italy. We rented a car. We had no idea where we were going. And we get to their kennel and, Patricio had me come into this area. So they had a yard and he sat a chair in this yard. And he told me to come sit in the chair, and he let like 30 Azawak run around, and they're barking and screaming and carrying on. And he said to me, do not look at them, do not touch them, don't do anything. Just sit in the chair and look at the ground. And these dogs are like inches away, barking and screaming, but they don't bite, but they're just like defending and being guard dogs. And then they start coming up to you and they start nudging you with their noses. And he said, don't touch them, don't look at them. This goes on for a couple minutes. I'm literally peeing my pants as I sit in this chair.
That's what I was thinking.
I was like, this is one of the dumbest decisions I have ever made in my entire life. I'm like, this is ends up as a news story of how a man gets mauled to death by dogs in a yard. And these Azawak, they start like rubbing against you and all this kind of stuff. And he said, don't touch them. And then he said, this one's going to come over. And he said, don't look it in the eye. But when it rubs against you, he said, just touch its back. And then slowly they all relaxed. And then all of a sudden they started coming over. And then, the whole pack changed once this one had accepted me. And it was a great experience learning about these dogs and their temperaments. And, they're tremendous guard dogs. And so, they have this... they're wary of strangers, so they're not a breed for everybody, and a lot of judges don't understand that. When they try to go over them, they try to wrestle them to the ground and things like that. But that's just lack of knowledge by people. But the Azawaks are they're for an experienced owner. They're not for everybody. They're very primitive in their minds, but they're beautiful, and they're wonderful, wonderful pets for the people that own them. Right. But they're not for everybody. And you learn that was a great learning experience, and I enjoy adventures like that. And Rachel and I had a great time, and traveling across Italy and eating and seeing these dogs and everything. And so I enjoy those parts of the dog show world.
That's a great story, though. That's a great story.
Yeah. It wasn't so much fun act the actual time,
but it's a good story now. This is going to be a great story.
Yeah, I was questioning my choices at that moment. Yeah. At least Irish setters would generally be friendlier.
You wouldn't be sitting in the chair alone and be knocking you off the chair.
Right. So, yeah. But, and that's the thing, I've been doing it a long time now, and I've had a lot of great experiences in a lot of different countries and met a lot of wonderful people. And, the dog shows have really changed my life. And as I said, I got a green card and came to live in the United States, and I've done things that, would not have necessarily have been available to me growing up in Australia and right. Not pursuing these dreams. And, it wasn't like it was there was a plan to do this thing, but it was just being open to the opportunities as they came along. And, I think I try to still do those things today. And, I sometimes you meet people and you think, there's something interesting about this person. And I've always been a little bit drawn to people like that, people that march to their own beat. And sometimes great things come from that, sometimes not, but sometimes people are just nutty. But sometimes, tremendous opportunities come from things like that. And I have to say it's a good guide for life to just be open to new opportunities. And even though we're getting a little older, I still try to, be open to those new adventures. So, yeah.
We're not getting. Well, I'm older than you. You're still young.
I know. I was thinking I've probably known you 27 years.
Yeah, probably right.
I remember when I worked for Tim. I remember you coming to shows.
Well, I remember going out to the regionals with Allison at one point, and I wasn't showing a lot. I wanted to sit and watch more than anything else because we had girls with us and whatnot. But I sat and watched Tim, and he would send. I watched him show dogs, and I was trying to change a few things about how I was showing poodles. I never showed a lot, but I did show some. And I loved the way he utilized the martingale all the time. Like I would watch him that weekend. I watched him with the martingale, and the way he worked it, and I think. I'm pretty sure you were there, that he had a lot of people working dogs outside the ring.
Yeah.
The young dogs.
Yes.
And you could see they were crazy. And by the time he got them, they weren't crazy anymore because you guys had worked so hard on that.
Right. Well, that was a big thing. So working for Tim, Tim rarely came to the kennel. And so a lot of the time we would arrive at the dog shows, and he almost always used martingales. We very rarely ever put anything on a choke chain, actually. And
after that weekend, I never showed another poodle on anything but a martingale. I insisted.
Yeah. So, and we would get to the shows, and a lot of the time, we would, he would say, well, take that one out on a lead, and we'd, move it up and down a few times. And then he'd say, well, try doing this. And then, you'd run it around. There was a lot of running dogs around on leads. That happened.
I watched it happen.
That happened.
I don't even remember who won. I just sat back and watched you guys. So.
Right. That happened a lot. That there was a lot of that at dog shows. And, Tim always used to say, we don't really lead break poodles. They just go. And it was true. We would have puppies that literally the first time they went on a lead was at a dog show. And they just went. And if they had the right temperament, you could literally have them lead broken in, 15 minutes. And right. They wanted to please you. They wanted to do it. They went. And that happened, as I said, for the 5 years I worked there, we were always at dog shows working dogs on leads and practicing with them, that kind of thing. And Tim, he was very much in, you've got to make them happy dogs show better than dogs that are made to show. Yeah. And, it's got to be their idea. And so that was, he was great about teaching you how to do that and what to do to encourage them. And, the dogs all loved him. And I said he didn't really come to the kennel a lot. So, the dogs would see him at the dog show, and it always had to be a fun experience for them. And so he could really get dogs to come out of their shell and show well. And yeah. Well, he was great about that.
He was amazing to watch work.
Yeah, for sure. So, and
that sort of leads me into my mentoring question. You've kind of touched on all your mentors. Is there anybody we've missed?
No, I say I learn from people all the time, and still today, and you just have to be open. you learn from people good and bad. There are people that obviously you learn not to do what they do and pick up, say, well, clearly that doesn't work. That's not a good idea. But I mean, I'm always open to talking to people and learning things. And I mean, early on in Australia, I would say, Bev Watt and Robin Wallace were tremendous influences for me, and Lynn Watson, and then John Pauline, but I mean, like when I lived in Seattle, I was friendly with Chris Terrell, and so that I would always watch the Afghans and I would talk to him. He had a red dog a black mouse red dog at the time I really liked, and I would talk to him a lot. So then when it came to having Matrix the Afghan, I would call Chris a lot, especially early on, for ideas on how to show this dog what to do, and Chris was very willing and gave a lot of great advice. And so just being open and talking to people and keeping those relationships open, it's a good thing. You don't want to cut people out of your life. No. Sometimes I've had bad experiences with people, and you have to try to resolve those things and work around them, and you never know, 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road, you might need their help and they'll be willing to help. So sometimes I think some handlers get a little bit of a rock star mentality, and they think that they can do everything and it's all about them. But I think there are certainly very talented people, but in retrospect, I think a lot of the time, I wouldn't say luck, but I think being in the right place at the right time
timing has a lot to do with everything.
Right. And so obviously you have to know what to do at that moment when the time is right. But I don't think it's all. I think you have to recognize that I was fortunate to be in this position at this time, and then make the most of that opportunity. And I think that you realize it's not necessarily just me. I have a tremendous support staff. I mean, obviously, having Rachel is tremendous, but then, Rachel keeps me grounded on, doing this with the dogs or doing that. But also it's having friends that you sound off with and you say, well, what about this? What about that? And having those handful of people that you can turn to and get advice about dogs or campaigning a dog or things like that. You need those people. And then there are then other people, as I say, I watch a lot of other successful handlers. I mean, I watched Mike and Linda Pitts over the years, and Birgit. I mean, Birgit was a tremendous teacher, and she had so much to teach people, and even still today, I'm friendly with Birgit, and now she's not handling, but you can talk to her and say, well, what about this? And she like instantly has an answer for it, and she will tell you, well, do this, try this, that kind of thing. David Fitzpatrick, the same. But I mean, there's a lot of people over the years, not one person. Karen Wagner, when I showed Matrix, was very helpful. You just have to be open to talking to these people and learning from them, and realizing that there's a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge, and they have a lot to give. Realizing maybe they know a little more than I do about different. I might know a lot about poodles, but they know more about this.
Right.
So,
what advice would you, if a young person came up to you and said they wanted to do this for their living, be a professional handler, what advice would you give them?
I mean, kind of what we talked about, being open to doing those kinds of things. But I think also as the things that I learned from Pauline, as far as we talked on earlier, the business side of things. You have to pay attention to a lot of those kinds of things, being professional with your billing, obviously there's the dogs have to be taken care of, and there's the animal husbandry part of that, and all those things take precedence to it. But then once you get past that, you got to talk to your clients. You got to send them bills in a timely fashion that are itemized, and you got to run it as a business. You got to pay taxes, get in a good accountant. There's a lot of dog people that get into problems because they're self-employed. They don't pay taxes, or they don't properly pay. I will say early on, Murphy and Jennifer said to me, get a good accountant. Years later, you will look back and you will realize the benefit of it. At the time, you think, God, this is expensive and I could do my own taxes. But years later, you will come to realize the benefit of having a good accountant, and having good help and the people that work for you. We've been very fortunate. We've had a lot of good people, young people that work for us over the years. And you have to realize also times have changed. When I worked for Tim, we almost never took a day off. And Penny and I worked in the kennel from like 8 a.m. until 11:30 at night, almost every single night. We rarely ever took a day off. We rarely didn't go to the kennel and work on dogs at night. And you have to realize today, people are not going to do those kinds of things. Times have changed. They have other interests. And I mean, rightly or wrongly, it is a different time from 20 years ago or 30 years ago when we did those things. I mean, now they'd say, oh, it was slave labor, or, we were taken advantage of. And I don't look at it that way, because I was doing what I wanted to do, right, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I think that, that's something, as I say, the really successful dog handlers, it is all they do every day. We live and breathe this. And as I said, for 15 years, I missed a lot of birthdays. I missed a lot of weddings. I missed a lot of Christmases and Thanksgivings with people. I missed a lot of things that later I would regret doing. But at the time, I had to be obsessed with building a career and making money and doing those kinds of things. And it's a work-life balance that is out of balance. And I say, when people say, oh, I want to be done at 5 o'clock, and, that's not reality of being successful in this business. No. If you don't want to care about dogs 18 hours a day, this isn't the right business for you. You should think about maybe showing dogs, but doing something else. You are not going to be a professional handler, or at least not enjoy the success that you would necessarily hope to achieve. It is it is all we do. I mean, sometimes I regret that, but it is all we do.
But you look at any profession, how things have changed now today because of the distractions. Yeah. You think about writers, you think about writers 30 or 40 years ago, the stories are, I don't want to say they're crisper and fresher, but you can tell they didn't have as many distractions as we do now.
Right.
And the same goes with our new dog people. It's hard to keep them interested because there's so many distractions.
Oh, absolutely. And, I used to be one of these people. I used to think, I worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and everybody should do it exactly how I did it. And I was one of those people that would say, oh, in the old days we did this and you should do the same thing. But I come to realize, like, if I continued that mentality, there would be no one to take over. So I have come to change my opinion on some of those things. I do think that you need to realize people are not going to do those kinds of things. So the times have changed, and we show fewer dogs than we showed before because we can't be grooming poodles for as many hours a day. So then, but in order to keep help, I have to do those kinds of things because I do need the help. There are young people that are interested in dogs and do want to learn and do want to do things, but they're not willing to do it for 18 hours a day. And so I have adapted, and I think the dog show people need to adapt a little bit more to what's going on in society and what's going on in life. We can't look and say, we did it this way and you should do it the same way. Times have changed and we need to adapt to those kinds of things. I mean, there are many things that were acceptable when I was an apprentice that are not acceptable in the world today. And fortunately, or times have changed and there weren't cell phones and things like that that would perhaps be career ending to some of us today.
Oh my God.
But, that's not to say it's, it was wrong. Some of the things that we did or happened were wrong. And they shouldn't happen today. And we have to realize those things have to change. And so how do we move forward? So I try to, rather than trying to dwell back on what we did years ago, I try to think, okay, well, how can I make it that I have people that want to work for us, that still want to go to dog shows and still be interested, and yet have a little bit of a balance in that they're not doing this all day, every day. And so, as I said, I almost never took a day off, but I do try to ensure that, like, the people that work for us now at least get one day off, things like that. And I think that it's incumbent upon us older handlers to realize, like, if we continued the way we were, the dog show world would die out pretty quickly. And I think. I think there are, some people that look at things as in the good old days, everything was better, and some things were better. But I think we have to really look back and say, well, some things are better today. There are, especially when it comes to the dogs, veterinary care, the drugs we have, the tests we have, those kinds of things for breeders, for handlers, all those kinds of things. There are, we used to have dogs that would suck on their feet and, chew on their legs and all this kind of stuff. And, we would put socks on them with vet wrap and do all kinds of things. And really, we were just treating the symptoms. And now we realize today, okay, these dogs had actual legitimate veterinary issues that sometimes could be treated now today with a pill. And, a month later, those issues are gone forever, but we never treated them back then. We just treated the symptoms. And so you realize, like, actually things are better today. We just have to be open to realizing those things. I think dog show people need to move their thinking with the times. It's not to say we shouldn't have reverence for these great handlers and these great dog shows and these practices that we did, but we have to realize that the times have changed, and how can we adapt and change with the times. And it's like I tell people, it's like when I grew up, I used to love cricket, and I would watch cricket, and we would have a 5-day test that was 9 hours a day. Now, no one watches a 5-day test in cricket. In fact, we moved to 1 day, 50 overs, and we thought that was great at the time. And now that's considered too long and too boring. And now they have these 2020s. And it's like, if you want people to be interested, you have to change. And, it's like, I don't know. I just think that I read an article a while ago, and it made me think about things. And it said, rather than thinking about how dog shows were 50 years ago or 100 years ago and trying to recreate a dog show from 100 years ago, perhaps we should be looking and saying, how do we make the best dog show in 2023 that is going to appeal to the general public, that they would want to come to our dog show and be interested in purebred dogs? So rather than dressing in fancy hats and old clothes, maybe we should do something that would make people in 2025 be interested in a dog show, make it more exciting or more interesting to the general public. And it made me think, well, there's probably some validity to that. Because we're going to die out. I mean, obviously, you know, the numbers of people that breed dogs and show dogs are different than they were years ago. It's harder to keep a number of dogs. It's harder to have kennels and all that kind of stuff. But it's like I say, you know, there are things that we did in the way we trained dogs or whatever that really shouldn't have been acceptable. And maybe we do need to move past those things and realize this is why, you know, it's like that saying, you know, this is why the general public looks at us and frowns upon us. We need to be aware of those reasons. It's like, you know, people would say, well, this is why the terrorists hate us. We have to then take that mentality and say, okay, this is why people that are against dog shows would hate us. And how can we change this that it would, I'm not saying, you know, oh, we stop breeding bulldogs or French bulldogs or whatever to accommodate, you know, dog rights people. But I'm saying, how can we breed bulldogs or French bulldogs that is healthy for the dogs and would preserve these breeds going forward and be, you know, not frowned upon as, you know, breeding unhealthy dogs that can't breathe and have allergies and all kinds of health problems. You know, we need to look at it and say, okay, perhaps we could breed bulldogs that could be good pets that don't necessarily have all these issues. And those are the things that now I'm a little more focused on how do we move forward from here? And the same with poodles. You know, we have so many more genetic tests available to us today. You know, when I started, we still had PRA. Now we have DNA tests for those things. We had this NE. Now we have DNA tests for that, von Willebrands and all these kinds of things. You know, we have so many more tools available, and you know, we should be utilizing that and realizing, okay, we should be able to breed poodles that are fairly healthy that people could have as pets. And, you know, that's how we turn the tide against doodles and all those other things that are going on in the world, is to explain to the world the benefits of purebred dogs, but also then turn that around and make it that we actually do have healthy dogs and we do have good things, that you can bring your family to a dog show and have a good time and it be enjoyable. And, you know, I say, you know, handlers, we need to be nice to the general public. A lot of handlers are not very nice to the general public, or people that go, you know, when you're at Westminster and you're on the benches, and yeah, it's annoying when people come and ask you, you know, for the 50th time, why do you do that with the poodle? But you have to realize, like, those people, you want them to walk away from the dog show and not say, well, those poodle people are assholes. Yeah. You want them to walk away and say, well, maybe I might get a poodle, you know, and it's realizing those are responsibilities that we have today, and that, you know, we need to pass on to other people and be aware of those things so that more people are going to come to the dog show world. And you know, it's like I say, very few juniors are actually interested in breeding dogs. You know, you talk to them and they talk about wanting to win this and that. And okay, that's great if you want to be a handler, but very few of them actually want to breed dogs. And they go from one breed to another. Well, we have to figure out a way to take these young people and then say, okay, they're coming to dog shows to show and win, but how do we get them to then become breeders and get interested in breeds and develop those breeds and have a lifelong commitment to showing dogs, rather than just showing in juniors for a few years and then moving on to something else? And I don't have the answers to those questions, but I'm thinking about the answers or how we move forward. And I think, those are the things now that a lot of us need to focus more on is solutions to these problems. So
that's a lot of advice, Chris.
Wow.
I liked it. It was a lot. All right.
Sorry, it was probably a little more than I should have got into.
All right. I have one more question for you.
Yeah, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That was fabulous. I mean, the insight was perfect. We all need to hear those things. And
sometimes I ramble a little bit. I probably need to get a little more focused on it, but yeah.
That was great, Chris. Okay, Christian, if you were to meet the 20-year-old Christian today, is there any advice you'd give him now?
Just probably be a little more patient. I think that, as I said, being open to opportunities was something I guess I was good at because I guess it happened. Also realizing not getting too tied down with having too many dogs. That was one thing. When I worked for John Pauline, they were like, you can have a dog. It was kind of the same with Tim. It was like, you can have a dog. At one time I had, I think 3, but it was like, not getting too tied down with that, but realizing, I worked really hard and I was really focused and really interested in dogs. And I was fortunate to be around people that recognized that and were accommodating to it. But realizing, it takes time and I would get frustrated. I would think, well, my dog looks better than that one and my dog showed better than that one. How come I didn't win? And getting a little annoyed and realizing, it does take a little time for some of those things to happen, but then also just kind of always trying to do the best you could do all the time. And those are good things to learn in life. Just try to be, the best you can be all the time. And just maybe being a little more patient.
It's amazing the answers I get to that question.
I would get a little frustrated and I would think things should happen a little faster or things like that. And I would just say, and being more patient with people. Sometimes people that work for us, I get a little frustrated with and realizing, people are doing their best most of the time. They're trying their best, and maybe their best isn't good enough, but realizing that, I don't know. Well, I don't know. I guess in hindsight, I realized too, I remember Zuleika always saying to me, if I've heard a song 30 times, I don't need to hear the end to know how it ends. And I realized like sometimes you'd have people work for you and early on you would know how it was going to end, but you'd keep them around because you needed the help. And I think in retrospect, I probably would have let some of those people go a little faster and just dealt with it because you realize, like, I know how this is going to end.
Right.
So experience is a good teacher.
Sometimes more work is created because you do keep those people.
Yeah, exactly. And then you realize, like, you do this in order to keep them, which then creates another problem. And then you realize, like, I should have just let them go a long time ago.
Sure.
We've all learned those lessons.
What does the future hold for Chris and Rachel? Are you guys going to judge?
I think a little bit, but it's like I said, I like poodles, so I'm mostly interested in poodles. I think Rachel and I are definitely slowing down. We have way less dogs than we had 5 years ago. We're looking at continuing on. I think we'll always breed dogs to some degree, but the traveling for the dog shows is getting a little tiresome and a little old. I want to do less dog shows all the time. I want to be home a little bit more. I do think that judging I find interesting. It's harder than it looks. Most people, same thing. People stand ringside and they think they know what judging is about. It's a lot harder than it looks. You have to be a little bit more patient with judges. And having judged a few specialties now, I have a little bit more appreciation for some people that have done it. I'm sure I have some interest in judging, but same thing. I think I'm not interested in going every weekend. I've done that for 30 years. I've gone to thousands of dog shows, and I don't know that I want to do it that much. But I enjoy that part of it. I mean, I've always, it's like I say, we've always judged because we're always, you have to, as a handler, you have to say, well, is my dog better than that dog? And why would someone like that one more, or what would appeal to it? So in a way, we've always been judging. It's now just turning it around and evaluating as judging the dogs against breed standards. But I mean, some handlers go on and they're very good judges, and some handlers are very bad judges. And there's no rhyme or reason, I guess, really, as to why that happens. But I think judging is harder than it looks.
I find it hard to fathom when you say, "Oh, you guys are getting older." I don't think you guys as old at all.
No, I don't think of myself as old either. I think of myself still I think of myself as being like 32 in my head.
That's a good age. Yeah,
that's how I think of myself. But then when I go to do some of these things, I realize, oh, I can't, or I'm tired. The next day, I'm really tired, and I regret doing it. And it's like just the going on these circuits, and I find, oh my God, I got to go to bed, and I never had those thoughts before.
Right.
And
when I wake up middle of the night now, Christian, it's 11 o'clock.
Yeah. I can relate. I mean, I say to Rachel, is 8:30 too early to go to bed?
Oh.
And so, when you were 30, you didn't think about those things. I mean, that was the thing. When I worked for Joe and Pauline, I was 20. I lived in Los Angeles. I mean, we would work all day, and there was a bunch of assistants that lived in that Los Angeles area, and we would go out at night. We would go to Hollywood or Studio City, and sometimes we go to Santa Monica, and we'd be out all night. I would pull into the driveway at 7 o'clock in the morning and work all day.
Yeah.
I'd take a half-hour nap on my lunch break, and then we would go do it again the next night, and I didn't think anything of it. And it was, I mean, that was a great experience because it, opened you up to a lot of opportunity or a lot of learning experience in life, not just dog shows. And being in Los Angeles was an interesting place, and you met a lot of interesting people over the years. And same thing, being open to those things. But I realized I couldn't do those today.
Oh, I don't even like thinking about it. Well, you know what, Chris? Thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate that you put this aside for me. I've been bugging you for a little bit, but not too long.
Yeah. Oh, no. I enjoy doing it. I just wish I could get more concise answers.
No, it was great. It was great. I wanted to interview you, and that was you. So
yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and good luck. I'm sure I'll see you somewhere down the road.
Oh, for sure, we're around somewhere. Thanks, Chris. That was great. Thanks for catching up on some great insight. I really appreciate your time. If you like what you're seeing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. And if you want to get a hold of me, go to Will Alexander's Dog Show Tips at gmail.com. And that's our new website as well, willalexandersdogshowtips.com. Thanks, guys. And don't forget about the podcast every week, The Dog Show Drive with myself and Wayne Kavanaugh. See you soon.